DJ and PK, it's 97.5 KSL Sports Zone. John Talty joins us now. John, good morning.
Appreciate you having me on.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. John Talty writes for CBS Sports, and I'm curious. So did you come up with this story idea, or did one of your bosses get a hold of you and say, we want you to write about NIL, who's got how much, and rank them? Because that sounds a little bit like Mission Impossible. I mean, does a little device explode at the end? How does that work?
Yeah, it's funny. So I did it with my colleague Chris Hummer, and I was actually going back through my text the other day, and it was around when Jordan Seaton went to LSU, and we were talking to some of the different schools that were involved in it, and hearing some of the numbers, and we started doing the math. It's like, man, yeah, that to Sam Levitt, like LSU's number has to be huge, and it was back in January. Like, we really need to see if we can figure out who exactly are the highest paying schools, and so. We've done some stuff in the past, like Chris and I have teamed up to figure out what's the average rate for a transfer QB and things like that. So we have experience in the NIL spending range, but it is almost an impossible task. People lie to you everywhere. Some people overrate how much they have. Some people underrate how much they have, and so the only way we could think to do it is just talk to as many people as possible. And so talk to 50 plus. It's probably 60 plus, honestly, and just. Tried to talk to somebody at every school if possible, but talk to people who are agents who represent multiple coaches, people involved in deals, just to try to get as accurate a picture as possible as to what people are actually spending.
At the end, it seemed like when you came up with your top 10, it wasn't that big a surprise. I was more interested in the numbers and in the gaps, but who has the most money? Well, it's the best teams in the Big Ten and the SEC. Thank you, Captain Obvious, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there is major shock. I think sometimes it's the surprise of who's not in there. And so, for instance, we had a story yesterday looking at a couple of those. Like, I think everyone just assumes Texas Tech is in that group. And, if the Brendan Sorsby scandal doesn't happen, Texas Tech would have been in that group. But you take his, deal off the table, most of it, at least I think they're paying some, but most of that off the table, and they actually dropped below that top group. So there are some, I think, misconceptions as to who's spending the most and who's not, but I think a lot of it was somewhat obvious. But I also think, I don't know how many people know that LSU might be above $50 million this year. I don't know how many people know that Miami was above $40 million last year. So I do think some of the numbers are still interesting to people. And then, at our sister company, 24/7 Sports, we put every Power 4 team into a tier, and that might be where people find more interest of wait, there are that many Big 12 teams below 20 million, stuff like that, which I think, none of that's really been reported before.
So obviously there's a lot of interest in the Big 12 here. So Texas Tech, what's their neighborhood? And then how far back is it to everybody else?
Yeah, they're in the $30 million neighborhood. And again, if Sorsby was there, they would be high 30s. So they're low 30s. They're the only one in the $30 million neighborhood for the Big 12. So that, I think, is kind of interesting. You look at the other Power 4 conferences, ACC, you've got Miami, 40 million plus. SEC, you've got multiple teams. Big 10, you've got multiple teams. So the Big 12 does not have anybody in the 40 million plus range, and then only has one team in the $30 million range, and then has the most teams out of any of the Power 4 conferences below that $20 million number, which is kind of fascinating. There's, based on our sourcing, there's not a single SEC program below 20 million, and really it's nobody really below 25 million. And you have quite a few in the Big 12, programs like Cincinnati and Houston and Central Florida, Kansas. There's quite a few. And so I think that's, one of the interesting things I think about what's happening in the sport right now is you are seeing some of those financial gaps grow. We've seen, Big 12 is getting the least amount of money in its TV deal. That stuff plays a role. You've got some of these huge Big Ten programs with, billion-dollar, donors and all that. Not that the Big 12 doesn't have some of those. Of course they do. But you're just seeing more money flood in, I think, to the Big Ten and SEC. And it plays a role in what we see on the field. I mean, you look at the preseason rankings, top two teams are in the Big Ten. You've got multiple SEC teams in that top 8 or so, and you're not seeing a Big 12 team there. And so sometimes it's obvious, but yeah, if you are spending a lot more money than some of your competition, you might be better. And we're seeing in the Big 12, their spending just is not matching the rest of the Power Four.
Did you come away with a new appreciation for some coaches saying, hey, you're really doing more with less?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. Houston is a preseason top 25 team, and they had a very strong year a year ago. And I think they were in the bottom 3, probably bottom 5 in spending a year ago in the Power Four, and they are again below the $20 million range. And so I think there are programs that are going to show us, and kind of, this is a bit of a cliche, but in a Moneyball type approach of where can we find inefficiencies? Where are we able to win? And so for a program like Houston, it's like, hey, we like tough-nosed guys. We can find these 3 stars kind of under the radar gems, and we can turn them into something. And of course, Willie Fritz was able to do that at Tulane, really built that program up before John Summerall got there. He's starting to do it at Houston. So I definitely have an appreciation for that. And on the flip side, especially now that we know some of these big numbers, like I think those programs need to be held accountable. At the end of the year, if you spent $35-40 million on your roster and you go 7-5, like that's a problem. And so I think we're going to see more of that accountability on return on investment of, wow, this program really exceeded what we think they spent. And on the flip side, this program really disappointed relative to the spending that we believe they did in 2026.
Is that what happened at Penn State, and is that what could happen at USC, or am I out of bounds here?
Yeah, USC is certainly an interesting one. They actually started, I think, a trend last year that other programs are now following, where they went really heavy on spending on their freshman class. And it's kind of bucking what we had seen the trend be. Like, if you put a lot of money in your freshman class, those guys might transfer, they might not pay off. Like, we had seen more like, let's invest in proven veteran guys. We saw, a year ago, Indiana obviously have a lot of success with not only the James Madison guys that came with Kurt Signetti, but also some random and transferred in from Cal. So USC bucked that trend. We're seeing others like Notre Dame and Texas A&M now do it for this recruiting class, but we'll see if it pays off. When you invest a lot of money in young guys, it could be great, or those guys might not, come along as fast as you hoped, and then you got a lot of money invested in guys who aren't playing on the field. So personally, I am a Lincoln Riley doubter. I have been for a while. They're the team that I think is maybe one of the more overrated teams, not only in the Big Ten, but also nationally. And some of that is just my skepticism as to whether their plan is going to pay off. But certainly they are, if they're not at $40 million, they're just a smidge below. And, to this point, the results have not really, backed up what their spending has been.
John Talty, national college football writer for CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports, joining us. Kyle Whittingham, you mentioned Fritz, has been great at developing 3-star guys. That was the Kyle Whittingham recipe at Utah. But I'm wondering if that's something that he sort of loses going to Michigan, given the money they have. Is he even fishing in the 3-star pool anymore? Did he basically double his NIL money when he went to Michigan?
They have quite a bit, yeah. If it's not quite double, it's probably pretty close. And obviously, it's well established. They spent a ton of money to get Bryce Underwood, and one of the most historic 8-figure deals that we've ever seen a high school kid get to go to college. So they have a lot of money invested in that program as well. But yeah, I'm also personally interested. You could probably say the same thing about Matt Campbell, frankly, at Penn State, where Iowa State did not have a very strong NIL program, almost to the point people have told me that like Matt almost kind of liked it. Like, I don't really have to think about it. Like, yes, I have things that I'd like to have, but also like I'm not getting the pressure of having a lot of NIL money. So how do they adjust? Do they keep doing what they've been doing, or do you kind of start shopping in a new aisle? So we'll see how that works. But I'll give you a kind of a similar example. Like Indiana, after the success that they've had this past year, like they started telling agents and others, like, listen, like that guy worked for us in the past, but like we don't need to take that guy anymore. We're going for higher guys. So that's what I think you'd like to see with Kyle and Matt at Michigan and Penn State respectively. And we'll see, what they can sign and also the portal classes that they're able to add. But certainly they have way more money at their disposal than they've been used to, and allows them to attract a different caliber kid than maybe they've been able to get in the past.
Can you really follow the money in the Big 12? I mean, essentially BYU and Utah were teams 2 and 3 last year. BYU's sitting here with these double-digit win teams that haven't gone to the playoffs, and nobody else in the power conferences can say that. Financially, are they basically 2-3, just a long way behind Texas Tech, or is there somebody else underperforming their number, or maybe Utah and BYU are outperforming their numbers?
Yeah, I mean, BYU and Utah are probably right where you put them. BYU is kind of an interesting one where, we got a wide range of insight or answers as to what people thought they were spending. It was all over the place. So that was one of the trickier ones, I think, actually, to pin down. And I think some of that just kind of, type of kids they recruit, a lot of other programs aren't necessarily competing against them. So they're not always getting a great range as to, what they're paying for different kids. But, certainly, as you well know, Kalani came out recently seeming pretty frustrated by some of their spending and resources available. And so there's still maybe a notch below some of those elite programs and a notch below Texas Tech. But I think they have, bumped up their spending, and they are definitely above, the bottom tier of the Big 12, which, I mean, there are programs that are in the $15 million range. Some people think that Colorado is below $15 million. I mean, there's some pretty lowish numbers in the Big 12 from what we understand. And BYU and Utah are certainly above that and above that $20 million range.
John Talty joining us, CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports. And as you go through and talk about, and for people who joined us late, you talked about how you talk to coaches, you talk to agents who represent players, you talk to agents who represent coaches. So you've got these, dozens of sources as you compile this. Did you get any sense that people worried about donor fatigue? That, you got to, depending on the school, 20, 30, 40 million this year, but asking for that 20, 30, 40 million next year and the year after that. And Kyle Whittingham has said, hey, it's exponential increases here. This thing's just taken off, and it's going to continue to grow. Did you get that, or did you get donor fatigue?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually talking to a group of SEC people yesterday about that exact topic, and they're like, we really haven't seen it. But I think it's school specific. I think I'll go back to what I was saying earlier, kind of on that return on investment. I think it continues to evolve. And so, at the beginning of this thing, NIL, we saw programs that traditionally had maybe struggled or had been successful in the past and were on down times where it's like, we want to win again. Let's throw in money, right? And we saw Tennessee, Texas A&M, Florida, some of these programs be very aggressive out the gate. And now that we're 5 years into this thing, we're getting a better sense of all right, are we spending our money appropriately? Are we I kind of want something. If I'm giving you $1 million, what am I getting out of it? So I think there's more strings attached to it than maybe there was in the beginning when it's I just want to see my team win. So that's part of it. But it's also are you asking me to give you a bunch of money for a 6-6 team, or can we actually take a leap? Can we be competitive? So I definitely think athletic directors, who we also talked to for the story, will tell you that there is donor fatigue. I think it's always hard to find money. You don't want to have to keep going to the same people over and over again, which for some schools they have to do. For others, they might have a wider base of people they can go after. And for some, it's, if you're at Michigan, Ohio State, there's a lot of people who can give money. If you're at a smaller school, it can be harder to find. So it's a bit of a mix, I would say. Some people think it's a misconception. Other people are this is a very real thing for us, and we don't know where the money is going to keep coming from. So some people are in great positions, and others, I think, are seeing that this is a bit of a struggle.
My entire life, this school's been terrible, and they've gotten good. And I got to say, when I started thinking about it, I got a ton of respect for Vanderbilt now. My entire life, Vanderbilt got annihilated in the SEC. They were rolling out 2 and 3 win seasons like nobody's business. And then we get to the NIL era, and they go 10 and 3. And I can't help but think there were a lot of people cheating in the SEC, and Vanderbilt didn't want to do it, and so they got beat. And now that NIL is legit and above board, some people at Vandy looked at each other and like, let's go do this. Let's be good at football. Is that an oversimplification, or is that what's happened at Vanderbilt in the last 5 years versus 50 years prior to that?
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely truth to that. I think it's a combination of things. They've certainly invested a lot from like an institutional level. Like they used to have the worst facilities by far in the SEC, like disgusting stuff. And they have pumped in hundreds of millions of dollars and like making that better, making it a place that people want to come to. And having Nashville as a place to help attract players is certainly very attractive. So I think that was part of it. Like the school had to decide, we're not too good for football. It actually would be good for us to invest in football in terms of attracting students and things like that. And then I think the second part is you've got two who I believe very smart guys, and Clark Lee, the head coach, and then the general manager, Barton Simmons, who used to work with us over at 24/7 Sports. Like I think they know what they want. I think that they are good at identifying it and going after it, and also not just like we're little old Vanderbilt. Like they have talked a big game, and I think a lot of us rolled our eyes maybe early on of like, oh yeah, Vanderbilt, you're going to be the best. Yeah, we'll see it when that actually happens. But they, I think, believed it and believed they could be more than just what they've traditionally been. And we've seen them build it up. Obviously, the decision to bring in Diego Pavia and Jerry Kill was super successful, paid off in a big way. And then you kind of roll with that momentum, being able to flip a kid like Jared Curtis, who was a five-star recruit away from Georgia to sign with Vanderbilt. Like they're starting to recruit at a higher level without losing who they are. And so we'll see what the long-term sustainability is of their approach and whether they can keep it up. But they've been an amazing story. And I think there's, the people involved deserve a lot of credit for not just accepting their place in the basement of the SEC and deciding we can be more if we try.
Last thing before we let you go, John. How come Notre Dame doesn't have $100 million? I always thought NIL. You got Catholics who love football all over the United States. Notre Dame packs them in wherever they go. They came down to Vegas to play BYU. There were a gazillion Notre Dame fans. They went to San Diego once to see a Navy game. I mean, it's packed that place. They go to Ireland. They pack that place. How come they're not sitting on $100 million?
It's going up. I'll tell you that. Their number's going up. And they are one of the most aggressive programs in the country right now recruiting the high school class of 2027. We talked to some GMs that are recruiting against them, and it's like they have an insane amount of money. So I do think the money is certainly going up. I think in the past, I would say it was a combination of they had like multiple collectives to start. It felt like they weren't really on the same page. I think the university was a little slow to adopt to it. So they kind of got off to a slow start. And then there's always going to be, and Vanderbilt kind of fits in this bucket as well. We have really high academic standards. That's the priority. We're not just going to take any kid just because he's good. And I think that's eased up a bit, but that was always kind of, I think, one of the challenges that maybe held them back from being just one of the absolute top spenders. But they have certainly, elevated. We have them as one of the top 12 spending programs in the country now. And if they keep up what they're doing in 2027, the class of 2027 moving forward, they will easily be one of the top spending programs in the country.
There you go. Well, that's really interesting stuff, and it was a ton of work, and you had to sort through all the line and half truths and all that stuff. There was a guy who used to work for the Utah Jazz, Walt Perrin. And he was their scout, and he didn't talk during the year he was scouting, but they always had him be the face of the organization during the workouts leading up to the draft. And he would get asked specific questions. He'd always chuckle and give you a sideways look. He goes, Liars Club is in session. I think you were dealing with the Liars Club. I think Walt's doing the NBA thing. You're doing the college football thing, but I think you have to speak the same language.
Absolutely. Yeah. Walt, now at the New York Knicks. I'm a Knicks fan.
He's okay. You know all about him then. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, John, we appreciate the time. We appreciate you taking the dive and trying to figure out all the numbers. And even if you can't get them exactly, just kind of ballparking them a little bit is still helpful. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on.
John Talty, you can read that story. He's at CBS Sports and at 24/7. Interesting stuff.